panelists come on screen now. And this is thanks for all of our attendees for showing up tonight. We really appreciate you coming on. And this is a moment now where we welcome you to ask any questions that you have for the panelists. And I'll start it off with a couple, because I'm kind of curious now. It's cool to see that you guys are working with each other. You know, it seems like there's a bit of camaraderie in this space. You know, you get that a lot with pioneers when you're all pushing the envelope like that. But I'm kind of curious though. I mean, how many of these stages are in the world right now? You know, where are they located? And you know, I'm also curious, like, how many projects happen on a fixed stage versus a pop-up that's just for a set? Anybody want to address those two questions?
I'll just say I don't think anyone knows how many there are in total of various sizes. I've heard, you know, folks at Epic kind of track these numbers, and there are hundreds easily. And as far as how many are shot on dedicated stages versus custom installs or pop-ups, I think right now it's weighted towards custom installs, just because, you know, it's hard to build a one-size-fits-all stage. It's very hard to do. So most of the time we're building custom.
Right. I mean, clearly, if it's you know, series, these sets stay up sometimes even years at a time. Yeah, but even so, the feature films are building their own stages. I'd imagine, you know, the permanent stages are going to be more affordable, perhaps for smaller productions, indie films, and quick turnaround kind of work like that. Would you say? Yeah,
there's a class of work like the car process type work that lends itself much better to dedicated stages. That's not to say that all of that work happens on dedicated stages, but you know, car process is typically, it's a car and people in a car and scenery moving by. So that's a contained use case, and much easier to do that on a smaller stage than a full-on film.
Anybody else have anything to add there? You know, another question that came to mind is the floors, LED floors. Now, I know when I last did the project with Jeroen, I think what was it, a 4-point-something millimeter was about the best we could do. And you know, the floor is actually the part that's likely to be closest to the camera. And so I'm wondering, I mean, how many projects use floors? Do all you guys work with floors, or is that where you try to avoid those kind of shots? Or talk about that.
I think it's really very much dependent on what creative vision, what kind of content and final results a client is after. Obviously, for flying scenes like the ones you worked on together, Ed, it's good to have an LED floor. But for something like Mandalorian, just name one, you want to have a practical set working together with the LED. So it's really depending on what needs to be achieved. It's still today very hard to have front plates in the real-time content, and to have shadows, to make people or talent stand behind something structural, which there's no way of achieving that except using practical sets. It really depends on what the result needs to be.
Got it. Anyone else want to address that?
Yeah, I think it really just depends on the aspect or the project, right? As Jeroen was saying, one of the biggest things about this kind of technology is occlusion, being able to occlude physical objects and virtual objects together. And at the end of the day, we're dealing with, we are working in 3D space, but at the end of the day, everything is comped in a 2D space, right? So one analogy that I use a lot is actually the multi-plane camera that Disney pioneered way back in, like, I can't even remember, but they actually used backplates, foregrounds, and middle grounds to kind of composite the whole entire imagery. And that's pretty much what we're doing today digitally. I think in the future, where we're going is we're going to be dealing with a lot of real-time object buffers where different we're able to spatialize a 3D space where we can actually capture whether the physical space, we can actually LiDAR scan that in real time and bring that into the virtual space to be able to create that kind of occlusion. But we're pretty far away from that. I would say, you know, in the next 5-10 years, we probably can do that. But I think at that point in time, AI technology will probably take over that to the point where we might not even need LED screens anymore, and everything could just be comped right there in real space, which is something that we've been exploring. And I feel like that's where the future of all this technology is going to be, especially, you know, because a lot of these productions require a lot of technology to work together. So as we, you know, keep developing and pioneering this technology, it's going to get easier over time with computing. So we'll see where it goes.
We have a question here from Paul Griswold. How does Unreal Engine and D3 work together, or do they?
Yeah, so I can answer that. Actually, funny enough, I was the first person, besides probably the Disguise developers, to actually use Unreal Engine with Disguise. At the time, I was pushing Ash, the developer and owner of Disguise, to actually implement it, because we were using Notch VFX to do augmented reality for a lot of demos that we were doing. So they magically created Render Stream out of that, because I kept on pushing them. Like I did not bother them. I mean, I would bother them every single day about this. And finally, they created a version of that. And there's actually a SIGGRAPH talk that I did about that, I think 2 or 3 years ago. You can find that, and it's called Intro to XR with Disguise. And at the time, at the end of that video, I actually demoed Render Stream, which was the first time the entire world ever saw Disguise and Unreal Engine talk to each other. And kind of happy about that moment.
Awesome, Berto. Berto's a little froze up right now. We have another question. Thanks, Berto. We have another question from Fran Benjamin. She's asked Alex, what skills do people need to do what you do?
That's a great question. First, you need to be highly motivated, and actually there's a huge demand for getting qualified people into the virtual production world right now. So to break it down a little more simple, if you have a background in 3D animation or editing, that helps a lot. Using Unreal Engine, first of all, Unreal Engine by itself, you can download the software for free. All the hardware that's required to make virtual production work is a little more costly. But the software itself, Unreal Engine, you can download it and start tooling around in it, learning it. So if you're familiar with other 3D animation tools like Blender, Maya, C4D, then a lot of those philosophies and the way that those 3D softwares work will carry on over into Unreal Engine. So learning the different softwares, being able to be on set and, you know, work with other people, you're going to come across problems. And so being able to keep a calm, clear head and work through the solution with other people, listen to other people's solutions, that's a really strong skill. So it's not only knowing the software, but it's being able to be on set and work with everybody and recognize, you know, what everybody's strengths are and how you can help each other find solutions. But also definitely knowing the technology. So you definitely want to do your homework and research all the different hardware or software that you might be specifically working with. And then, you know, definitely reaching out and talking to other people that, you know, are willing to help. You'll find that a lot of people in this space are willing to help and share their experience and knowledge. So It's just being able to work with other people is a really strong skill. But specific softwares, if you want to get into, Disguise, Unreal Engine, Maya, Blender, C4D. Also, you can use footage. So if you're a good photographer, or or if you have like a 360 camera, a lot of times using a 360 camera, we put 360 footage on the volume all the time. We also use panoramic images. So we've done shoots that have been all panoramic images. We've done shoots that have been 360, 11K content out of a 360 camera. We've done shoots that have been all Unreal Engine, just all 3D. And then we've done shoots that have been a mix of the few. So we have an HDMI matrix, a switcher basically, that allows us to switch between different systems. So I think it's more figuring out what interests you the most, and then working with other people that have other skill sets.
It's very cool. It's interesting you mentioned panoramic. In the early 90s, we were shooting panoramic medium format camera that spun around on its own axis, a slit scan like camera, Hulturama, I think it was called. And there's like this whole community of panoramic photographers. So there must be huge libraries of that kind of work out there.
Yeah, and on that note, collaboration is key. So we have a stage here. We specialize in programming and virtual production, getting the camera tracking system to work on the stage, having tools available to change the environments on stage, recording the camera tracking data as an FBX file so that you can go on later in post and composite more VFX elements. But collaborating with content creators is really important for our company. So collaboration in general is key to this, because not one person or one company does everything.
Yep. So we have a question from Rob Peasley, which really may have already been answered. He said he's the department chair in creative media program, and he wanted to know thoughts about how we might effectively prepare students to enter the workforce and work in these spaces. Anything else anyone wants to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is understanding 3D space and spatializing, right? One of the biggest things in this industry of XR and AR and all the Rs is real-time content. So being able to understand how to create real-time content to actually physical scale. That's if you go back and listen to all my talks, like the biggest thing is like understanding scale and dimension is your best friend. By doing a lot of calibrations and
we lost you for a second there, Berto. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you gotta love Zoom.
You want to go try someone else? My internet's pretty bad.
Oh, no worries. Well, I did have a thought here, a question for you guys, because I know I actually, after this project with Jeroen, I was like, oh my God, as a producer, I know visual effects. I've mostly produced animation and directed some and whatnot. But the language of XR with the game engines in particular is quite different. I mean, these game engines were developed for gamers, right? And so I was like, game levels, like, what are we talking about here? And so I went and took a class in Unreal. Ed Dawson-Taylor and Jackie Cooper have an awesome class. What's it called? CG Pro, I think. And so I got my head into, because I realized if I'm going to be producing in this space, I need to understand the tech and the language and everything, right? But one thing I realized, there's a lot of environments that you can just, I downloaded a whole jungle for $35 in Unreal from this Quixel, whatever, library. And it looked really good. I mean, there's mountains in the background and like fog, and the trees are blowing in the wind. I mean, it was like turnkey, right? But what if there isn't a stock environment? You know, it also, Unreal looks very like there's a lot of depth to it, right? And even the teachers in the space, there's a lot they like, it's hard to get your head around the whole thing, right? And so I'm just wondering, if somebody needs a custom environment, how hard is that? You know, if you can't just download stock or throw something together fast, and you have to go out there and custom make everything, which I imagine a lot of feature films do. It's, you know, we're saying virtual production is a lot easier and cheaper because, you know, you don't have to go to the environment. But if you have to actually build the environment from scratch, is it really cheaper and easier? I'm curious.
Depends. There's this concept you'll hear called kit bashing, where artists will grab pieces available from various sources, put them together, and create something that tells the story. And sometimes those kit bashed environments are suitable for the job. At other times, you need world-class artists to come in and build things. And as soon as you need those world-class artists, you need to be prepared to spend the time and the money to get it right. And when you do, you've got to be prepared with the artwork and the feedback that those artists are going to need to get the final result to where it needs to be without wasting a lot of cycles.
Yeah, now I know that there's people going around the world shooting photogrammetry, like Earcants, and a friend has been doing this for years. And can you just send a crew out to say, go capture this environment?
Yeah, there are crews that specialize in this kind of work. And you mentioned the Epic Games marketplace. You know, you can get very good looking stuff on that marketplace, and Epic has put a lot of resources behind developing. They want to enable people to be able to do things, even if you're not a modeler or a texture artist or a lighter yourself. You can get yourself 80% of the way there with these freely or inexpensively available assets as a place to start.
I have a good example of this. We did the virtual production. We were the entire virtual production department on Muppets Haunted Mansion, which a lot of people didn't realize was about 70% virtual sets. So to be clear, we'd never set foot on the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, at Disney World, at Disney World Japan, or anything like that. Everything was entirely created off of reference material. And that gives you an idea of the type of instance in which you'd want everything to be custom. You actually have, you know, some type of branded world or some type of specific franchise environment that you're trying to recreate. That's going to be an instance where you're probably going to want it to be natively built in a virtual environment. And you're going to want that to be, you know, that production designer, that DP, and your environment artist working for weeks to get that dialed in. So when I say weeks, that should give you an idea of the type of cost associated with this. It's not going to be too different from traditional visual effects. The one change that you need to have in your mind here is when you do traditional visual effects, you're focused on shots and you're focused on nailing this beautiful shot. Now that could be a 10-second snaking shot, or it could be a 3-minute driving sequence, but you're focused on a shot level. When you get into virtual production, you're focused on creating almost like standing sets. And this standing set could be lit in different iterations, but at the end of the day, what you need is a beautiful looking set. So if that's going to be scanning a natural environment and what's going to actually give you that result, then that's usually what people do. But more often than not, I'd say more than 75% of the time, it's people creating, it's an artist going, you know, let me just think of a beautiful way to build this and doing that. And, you know, that's been the bread and butter of the entertainment industry for decades, right?
Definitely can see, though, how what you're saying about pushing more into pre-production, because you actually have to build these sets first before you can go shoot. We have another question from Christopher Bellacci. He says, he's asking what technical advance, hardware or software, do you not have yet that you can't wait to get your hands on to produce better virtual productions?
Occlusion technology, I think, is the most important thing. Being able to have shadows, reflections, right? Like, yes, we can get some of that, but being able to actually have your reflection onto the virtual world is really important, along with shadowing, right? I mean, you can do that with contact shadows today, but every time you look at that stuff, it doesn't look right. So I think that is probably going to be, the biggest thing. And also, like, real-time texturing of lighting onto humans and things like that, to be able to occlude the world a lot better and integrate it. I think that's the biggest thing that it's missing today. And I'm hoping, as I mentioned earlier, AI, I believe, is going to fix a lot of this stuff. I know some people that are already working on this type of technology, and yeah, it's going to be very exciting.
Very
I have
cool.
something to add. I know that a lot of scene, if you think about the scene that you need, it might not always be that you need to go into a game engine to go through that world. So we're looking at solutions that will take, real photographs of a space and then turn it into your needs, where you have parallax, you can move around. There's a limitation to it, but you don't always have to go and build a whole new world for every shot that you need. Depends on what it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and this sort of relates to a question Chris Soldo is asking about when there's actual live action footage that ends up on the LED panels. Who shoots that and coordinates so it's in the camera composite? But I think this sort of relates to, I mean, you're not necessarily shooting just live action, right? We're actually using LiDAR and photogrammetry with lots of separate photos, or like what's the most common way to acquire the footage for the LED?
If a production needs to have actual photography projected on LED and then filmed with their motion picture camera, all that needs to be planned out ahead of time. We need to know, what color gamut the actual LED is displaying, and what is the camera sensor seeing. If you don't get all those steps right, you end up with a color look in camera that's off, and then it's not going to match your subsequent compositing when the compositor is bringing in the footage shot on the LED stage with other footage that needs to marry up. So typically on big shows, these considerations are looked after by the production or the main visual effects vendors who are looking over certain sequences.
Go ahead.
One more thing that I should mention. This is a little bit of a non-answer, but I feel like a lot of the innovations that we're looking for as filmmakers have been achieved to some extent. Now, some of them might have, it may take you more effort to actually deliver on them. The innovation that I think we see moving forward, and that everyone here is kind of addressing this, is really more on the business side. It's on getting people on board with the technology, figuring out pricing and workflows that are going to make sense for producers. Being a producer myself, I know the pain that's involved in using a new technology, and we need to make it easy for you guys to hop into the space and start playing around. Once you play around and you kind of build your first sandcastle, whatever you want to call it, then you have a lot better understanding of it. And so the exciting thing is we've done our job as businessmen to kind of get people on board with the technology. So there's probably at least 1,000 people out there that the people here, we've gotten them into a stage, and we've gotten them through successfully. So now they're all going back to budgets, to scripts, to storyboards, and going, hey, this is now something that I can incorporate into the way that I'm thinking about how to build this scene. And so that to me is the more interesting part that's happening right now. It's kind of like there's this integration of business and artistry happening, and that's a sign that the technical part of it has been somewhat solved.
Cool. Paul Griswold asks, he's teaching a course in Unreal Engine specifically for virtual production. And he's asking if you think it would be worthwhile for them to get into learning photogrammetry with tools like reality capture, which he points out is now owned by Epic, for the asset creation. Or is modeling, like 3D modeling animation, is that more relevant than photogrammetry?
I myself would encourage people to start with the fundamentals of modeling from scratch before photogrammetry. But some people out there might be amazing photographers, and that's their lane. So go for it.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to add here. I think people should be really learning the engine. Because if you don't understand how to manipulate the engine or create a scene in the engine, if you're creating photogrammetry or any type of assets, that's great. But if you can't integrate them into the engine, then that's a different story. So really, for me, the biggest thing was understanding the engine, using all the marketplace assets that are available, so that I don't have to go out and seek for stuff. So that I can just stay in engine, learn it. And then once you do that, I think it is beneficial to start now going into the world of creating your own assets to kind of stand out from all the marketplace assets that exist today.
And also learning how to build models that can be optimized for the engine, because I see that happening a lot.
I recently was looking at Unreal Engine 5. Amazing stuff what they're doing with where you don't have to bake shadows anymore and this sort of thing, but it's just getting better and better.
Yeah, and they're working on a technology called Nanite specifically for photogrammetry. So the future of that is like you don't have to optimize, right? Like you can, in their video, like billions of polys is what they're going to be able to accept. So if that's the case, he mentioned reality capture. They bought reality capture out, which it is, photogrammetry type technology. I think in the future we won't have to optimize, right? We might a little bit, but I think that's going to be less and less of what we do.
Nice. I have a question for Jeroen. We put up that stage in the Hawthorne hangar with it's like 90 feet wide and 25 foot high, cylindrical wall, 52-foot floor coming out. That was pretty big. Have you done anything bigger since, or is anybody building? I mean, what's the biggest, virtual stage that you guys have built, or anybody, Jeroen?
We built a few large volumes, but I think at this moment, Pixelmondo in Canada is probably, and size-wise, probably the bigger ones. So that's to shoot the big shows. But like Brian was saying earlier on a question you asked, it's so much dependent on what kind of production is going in there. That's really driving the size. It's not so much who has the biggest, the widest, the deepest, the brightest. It's the final result that gets shot on those volumes or screens.
Yeah.
I do see, especially then for the music side of what we do, smaller mobile XR screen that even fit in a truck, going around and shooting footage. But size is not really a defining factor for success here.
Yeah, of course, we had to put a 40-foot wingspan plane on the stage.
Yeah,
so
that didn't help.
Yeah. I do have a question here from Patrick Morris. He's asking about slow-mo shots. What's critical for that? And can you do a higher frame rate, like 120 frames per second or more?
That's tough. Can be done. However, it's tough because you need to lock all the signals, and you need the panels to run at the same rate. which means you need your content to run at the same rate. And it can be a challenge to get content running at that high of a frame rate.
And not only content, technology in itself as well, you know, like the refresh rates and the gen locks and cameras and all that stuff, you know. It's not just the content itself, it's the whole entire pipeline and workflow. And today, you know, we work with 60. I mean, that's kind of like the max. I mean, we have monitors that do 240, 144, but that's just from desktop monitor. And I think Jeroen would know a little bit more about these LED displays on that end, but I think it's Moore's law, right? Every year, you know, things double, and we'll get there eventually. I just don't think it's going to happen like in the next 5 years.
Got it.
Yeah, hearkening back to a question from Chris a few minutes ago, where he asked, you know, what do you want to see? What new breakthroughs or tools? So yeah, it's GPUs, and it's very fast hard drives, and it's panels that can do you know, higher bit depth and higher refresh rates.
Very cool. You know, I've seen like, well, these companies, Silverdraft, I think is one, and they have these GPU supercomputers. Anybody using anything like that? I mean, you know, you can virtualize to make a cluster of GPUs even look like a single fatty GPU or whatever. Anybody playing in that space?
A little bit.
Yeah,
I think
we use the dual A6000 GPUs in our typical workstation. I think that's probably par for the course for everyone here. But yes, the virtualized workflows are a thing of the future and something we're looking at now.
Yeah, although I was going to say, although I don't think Unreal Engine does SLI or multi-GPU, but I'm sure they're probably working on that.
Like, what is it? Vulkan, I think, allows that. Yeah.
Supposedly there is a, you didn't hear this from me. Supposedly there will be multi-GPU support coming for real-time engines in general. As far as another innovation similar to that, there is a lot of discussion about pushing processing to the cloud. And I know that's for those of us who are here, who know the things that can go wrong in internet connections and latency, you know, our blood pressure definitely goes up 10 points hearing that. But I think that what it really means is that huge amounts of firepower, probably, you know, think about it like within 40 miles of the stage is probably like the functional distance. And then so all that firepower will be happening at that data center, and you'll be getting fed down like a lossless video signal. And so think about the benefits of that: less technicians on site, less hardware, less servers, less rental fee, you know, and that's something that a lot of people can look forward to.
Yeah, and if people want to explore that, Unreal Engine has a feature called pixel streaming, and you can actually host Unreal Engine on a cloud and pixel stream that via the internet, essentially lossless, but very experimental. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with 5G, I mean, you could have a GPU supercomputer on your mobile device, essentially. Alex and Isaac, I know, I mean, the work I've done in domes, you know, you can have 30, 60 million pixels that you're pushing to this huge immersive display. You know, you can't just crop it down to an area. Did I hear you say, Alex, that you're using a cluster of disguise servers?
Yeah, a cluster of servers. So in general, real-time 3D engines are very processing heavy. Like some others were mentioning, getting them to run at 120 is insanely hard. Getting them to run at 24 frames per second for the speed of we usually shoot at 24 or 2398. So getting them to run at 24 is usually a challenge in itself. 120 is definitely a challenge. So we use an array of cluster nodes to split up the processing load across multiple servers. So we have basically one render node. Each render node renders a single 4K output. Anything more than that is just asking for trouble. So we, generally speaking, most people will have each render node render a single 4K at the most. And then those servers, they live in a 61-degree air-conditioned room, because these things get super hot, and we don't want you don't want your server to overheat like your car and then break either prematurely or overheat and break mid-show and lose frame rate. So it's not just having the biggest, baddest GPU, it's keeping the computer happy, keeping it at the right temperature. So I think most people will keep their servers in a server room that's climate controlled, ideally, or at least keep them water cooled or have them running at the right temperature. So splitting up your processing across multiple servers for rendering, and then also splitting up your processing across multiple LED processors. And that comes back to the point of, if you want to start running your LED, running your screens and your environments at 120 Hertz or anything more than 60, the faster you want to have, the faster you want your refresh rate to be, yet that's more data, that's more processing. So it's not just running the content faster, now you have to scale up your entire system for processing. So here, say we have 6 processors running the whole volume. If we want to run at double the speed, we're going to need double the amount of processors, and that's double the cost. So there is a say minimum amount of processing, and then if you want to start scaling up, you're going to start scaling up your processing and all your hardware also.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add one thing here as well, is that not everything, not every effect, for example, particle generations, can be really split across multiple GPUs, because the way that they render, they render on a random seed. So if you have 2 particle systems or 2 clusters running the same scene with the same particle system, the actual particles won't work together. You need to make sure that they are set to deterministic in order for that to work. Otherwise, if you have like snow or some objects like crossing the actual cluster, it won't actually merge together properly, and that's due to particle systems being random, and all GPUs render at random seeds. So that's another issue within itself with clustering data like that.
Absolutely. We run into that in the domes as well. And not just particles, but some effects depend on camera normals. And when you render multiple camera views to get a wider field of view, you run into, what we do is we over render the frames and soft edge blend them. That helps. Well, gosh, I think we're hitting the end here. Let's squeeze in one more. Greg Panos asked, is anybody using head-mounted displays integrated in with the volume? Greg's a VR pioneer from way back, so he's just curious about that. Yeah, crickets.
You can use on that not in the volume specifically, but you can use VR headsets to previs your environments before you get on stage. So that's a great tool for the virtual art department and the practical art department to come together and previs both the virtual props and the practical props, and just get in the space and see how the scale is matching up. Start playing with a virtual camera and start doing previs, so that you work out your problems in previs and not on set.
We love headsets in the immersive attraction world, because you can previs your attraction, you can play video in it as well. So it's a great tool.
Yeah, you sit in the dark ride and have a virtual dark ride experience. I love it. Well, you guys are awesome. Any final words? Anybody want to add anything at the end here?
There's enough work for everybody.
Check out vpglossary.com. VES just released a virtual production glossary. It's a super good resource.
Nice.
Thanks for that. And really appreciate all you guys, Alex, Brian, Berto, Rene, Jeroen, Valerie, Isaac. thank you so much for your time. Thanks to Diana and Sunil for helping out behind the scenes. And I think we're going to bring it to a close. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
And
So much,
thanks to all the
everyone.
attendees. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.